welcome to Inside Redemption. My name is Luke Simmons. I'm one of the pastors at Redemption Church Gateway. And with me today are Kirsten Trena and Chris Amaro. Kirsten is the director of our Redemption-wide foster care, kinship, and adoption ministry. And Chris is one of the lead pastors at Redemption West Mesa and has personally been super involved with these issues related to foster care, kinship, and adoption. And so thanks for doing this, guys.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
So Kirsten, how long have you been helping lead this ministry?
About 8 years. We had adopted our daughter and had her 6 months when I texted Tyler and asked him how I could pray for the ministry that I knew was getting started. And his response is, "Do you want a job?" And so cautious on your texts. But so I started officially on my birthday.
Oh, wow.
2013.
That's easy to remember. So the ministry was already going when you got involved. Maybe rewind the clock a little bit. And I'm sure you've kind of learned the history of how it all got started. Yeah. What was the history of that ministry here?
Well, Arizona has a slight child welfare crisis and has for quite some time. And we saw it increase in 2008 with the recession that we had. And so Redemption had connected with 2 other churches, Hillsong now and Mission. And the 3 pastors had gotten together and just said, hey, this is what God calls us to do. Yes, the state is in charge of this, but we need to engage with the state. How do we do this? And they created an organization that is an umbrella organization that we all partner with.
Is that AZ-127?
AZ-127, yeah. And then it is kind of an umbrella for churches to get involved. It's a tool. They provide toolboxes. And so that jump-started Redemption's ministry, and then I jumped in after that. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
How about you, Chris? When did you get involved?
Well, my wife and I, Ruthie, I think we always thought we would eventually one day do foster care. And it was funny how sometimes you have your timing and it's sometime in the future, but God has his timing.
He's always doing that.
That's what he does,
Changing
right?
the timing, yep.
And so in, 2016, I had just bought a car. And I was like, all right, great. We can buy a smaller car. We all fit in it. Well, then, 2 days later, I got a call from a family member who had just had a baby and she was actually asking me to take 5 children. And that was just impossible. So we had taken Sydney, our daughter, who now we've adopted. And so it just kind of fell in my lap. And then the following year, 2017, we ended up taking in another little boy. So it wasn't something we were actively seeking out. We weren't licensed. It just was like, it was God's timing. Like, let's go. Let's do it. Yeah.
I love too that you were involved from a kinship perspective and a foster care perspective and an adoption perspective. Like you've
done it all.
Yeah, such wisdom in all of them. Yeah, and reunification. And
So Kirsten, you mentioned earlier that this is an issue that God calls us as the church to be connected to. Chris, why is this such a key thing to the heart of God?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think with the gospel, you see that God cares about lost people, right? God goes and finds the lost sheep, right? Or we see that God came to seek and save the lost. And so God's about redemption. We're a redemption church. God's about restoration. God's about healing brokenness. This world's not the way it's supposed to be. And so God is actively working to make things the way they're supposed to be. And we're not supposed to be separated from our families, right? We're not supposed to be away from God. And so God is actually actively going out and seeking us out. And he even adopts us into his family, right? And so adoption is just this glorious picture of the gospel and what God does for us. And then we get to be a part of that, healing and entering into brokenness, which can even be difficult as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that picture of adoption just from a theological perspective. Like if God only forgave us, that'd be great.
Yeah,
But he doesn't just forgive us and go, hey, you stay over there. He forgives us and he adopts us. He becomes our Father, right? That's the Lord's Prayer, our Father in heaven.
I think when you look at it too, like we were created to be relational by a relational God. Yeah. And what Satan thrives in is that separation and that isolation. And you see that in just the breaking up of families and the beauty of God going, I will put families together and I will create them my way. And you just see how God just, even in brokenness, redeems his initial plan of connection and community.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it seems, I think we'd like to believe that because it's so close to the heart of God, if we get involved with this, it'll all just be smooth sailing. And you already said just how difficult this can be. Share maybe a little bit more about that.
I mean, especially when you're dealing with kinship, you got all these family dynamics going on, family members accusing you, people not happy that the way things are going. You got this tension with this child, and everyone has an idea of where that child should be, right? And then, so we faced a lot of accusations and hardships with that, and then adding another child was difficult, and then you got two different caseworkers. You get these children, and then you got to go get licensed, and then a couple years later you got to go get re-licensed. and having already 3 children, so now you go from 3 to 5 children. That stretched us big time.
Yeah.
And I think what it did is it by God's grace, he sometimes he takes us through these difficult things, and it reveals us. Right? It reveals those areas where we need to grow and mature and change. We got to lean on him, and we got to pray more. And so there's this difficulty and there's this beauty hand in hand, right? This suffering and the sanctification and the joy of adoption and the pain of reunification, which is very difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah, so there's all the logistical stuff, like I bought the smaller car and now I need a bigger
Now
one.
I need 2 of them.
I got to get licensed. And then all
2 days later.
all the emotional challenges of that. Man, that all feels weightier than I think maybe folks who just want to make a difference maybe it's harder to count the cost. Are there any other surprises that you find as you work with a lot of families? What ends up surprising folks?
I think it's all a surprise. I just think you can prepare people. What we really try to do is we're really real with families, because there are a lot of families that want to love kids and see this as a call, and they want to do that. And so we really try to just be really honest and say, it's really hard. Like, you're entering into brokenness, and it is inextricably combined. Like when you look even at the cross, you see that we only get life when Jesus dies for us. Like, you can't separate those. I don't get life if he doesn't die. And when you look at the brokenness and the pain of foster care and adoption, someone loses. And so we talk a lot about that. I know that, like, when my daughter's birthday comes around and we celebrate her, I know that someone else is celebrating her from a distance, but not with her. And so there's a weight that you carry. I think you have to, and this is one thing that's really important, is that we really push the value of every person that's involved. Like a birth mom that made a bad choice, when you look at her history and you find out that she was removed as a baby from her family, it's just systemic generational patterns that that are just broken. And that's, you get to play this beautiful role of watching God step in and crush those barriers. But it's still a crushing. So yeah. But I mean, I look at my kid and I'm like, God does beautiful things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think about the families at Gateway that I know that are engaged in this, and we have a support group around them, but it's still just super hard. Yeah. And I'm so thankful for the endurance in it. And I think that that willingness to enter into that suffering and to enter into the challenge and the confusion and the sloppiness and all that goes with it is just such a picture of how Christ enters in and pursues us. And so to hear you guys talk about how you have leaned on him through that, I mean, that must just give you incredible strength to keep going.
I don't think you could do it if you didn't have that. I don't know how people do this without that.
Yeah.
Kirsten, you've talked as well about how this whole ministry has given you platform to be able to talk with non-Christian.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting things, because as Christians, we're called to it. But to the world, that doesn't make a lot of sense because they know it's hard. And so my family's a very visibly adoptive family. When I go into my restaurant with my staff, they don't understand why that was the choice we would make, or they don't understand why we would engage in foster care and adoption, because they know it's hard, and they ask questions and they want to know why. And you get to just say, it's because God loves people, and just share that gospel. And you can share literally, this is what God did for us. And, just it gives you just visions of beauty. I think we had some things where Flagstaff needed some car seats, because there's a large removal up in Flagstaff. And so car seats are really expensive. And so we threw it up on an Instagram feed, and we got 17 car seats. And that doesn't, like, our wins are, not 900. We got 17 car seats, which is amazing. Yeah. But it was people who didn't go to church. It was just people who saw a need. And so you get to actually bring people into caring for the vulnerable from places that wouldn't.
Well, and I love that too, because we'll say as Redemption that we're better together.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those ministries that really proves that. And so I don't know if you have any favorite stories of that, Kirsten, but just the ways that you have kind of seen how this ministry is stronger because we're multiple congregations, not just one.
Yeah. One of the best stories that I've seen, I'm going to throw the ball to you, because your story it's so great. Like, I can't even do it justice on how, with Martin and Suzanne and that whole.
Yeah, if you want to see deeper dive into it, go watch the video. It's up on our YouTube page, I'm sure, right? Yeah. But I had another family member call me and ask me if I would take in another child. I already had 2 children, so I had 5 children, and we were stretched to the max. I mean, there's no way we taking another child and stay somewhat relatively healthy and sane, And so I had mentioned a friend, Martin and Suzanne Gonzalez, and it was pretty. They basically, my family member was pushed pretty much to the end, where they were trying to get her to sign over rights, because the child was with another family already, but she wanted her baby to go with a Christian family. And so I mentioned Martin, Suzanne, and they said, all right. They had already been through a couple reunifications, which, again, like I tell you, it's very hard. Yeah. I mean, it's painful. It's gut-wrenching. And so they said, all right, well, we'll just see what God does. And I remember going to that court date with them, and we're just thinking, like, there's no way this thing's going to happen. There's no way they're going to change placement at the point where they're trying to close this case. They're trying to hand over rights, sever rights. And by God's grace that day when we went in, her normal caseworker and supervisor weren't there. There was a sub-in supervisor, someone who was a little more neutral in the case. And so they said, well, Martin and Suzanne were there. Let's explore it. So just to move around the pieces and to work things out a way for there to even be a chance to start it. Yeah. Because I think if the normal caseworker, supervisor would have been there, they would have said, no way, we're not even considering that, right? And it just opened the door and it really went really incredible and really fast.
And I think you look at it, when you look at kids, their history and their stories are so important. And so here's this kid, you already knew Martin and Suzanne before the situation happened. Yeah. And so you had a relationship. And so they're able to still engage with their little one's birth family. And it just is, you see story after story on how one redemption family will be a respite family, and one will be a foster family, and then someone else will be an adoptive family. And you just build these internal families that are so strong in the faith. And they're all dealing with brokenness. And so they just build each other up in these really cool ways.
And they're over at Redemption Tempe, and we're at Redemption West Mesa. So you see this cross congregational interaction happening there. And I know they even adopted another child from Jason Raber, who's another pastor at Redemption Tempe, and ended up with 2 children at the same time. Yeah. And I think she's got this amazing story about, a prayer and some butterflies, seeing 2 butterflies. I mean, I can't tell her story, but that's why that video would be great.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank those of you who are engaged in foster care, kinship, and adoption. And I want to encourage you, what you're doing is important, and we're so thankful that you're doing it, whether you are fostering or whether you've adopted. Maybe you're someone who's helping support those who are. Maybe you're doing respite care. Maybe you're just helping provide resources. But thank you for doing that. Thank you for continuing to do it. And I hope you'll keep praying. Pray for Kirsten. Pray for our other congregations as we seek to just honor Jesus and display the gospel through loving the vulnerable and the least of these. Just like God loves us, we want to love the people God puts in our path. So thanks so much.